Welcome to Raw and Refined, the Gentleman's Hour, where we're going to have engaging conversation with middle-aged black men about what's going on. We welcome you to listen, like, comment, and subscribe with the hope that we will encourage others to join us for future conversations. We always like to start off with a toast. And with that toast, it's because we're gentlemen, and we like to do it raw and refined.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Raw and Refined. So I'm going to start off the beverages for us today. I've got a nice, of course, got my Yeti, John. But I've just got a big Yeti full of ice water. Today has not been the efficient hydration day that I had needed to make it. And so I just got me a big jug of water to sip on while we're having this conversation.
Ain't nothing wrong with it, Rich. You know, some good old water is something that our body needs. Refreshing, actually, and quenches the thirst. So, you know what? I'm rocking that right there with you, and I got my Yeti to go with you.
My man, my man, got your Chicago Bears
Got my
Yeti.
Chicago
That's
Bears
dope.
Yeti.
I should have got my Yeti, but I just got me some LaCroix.
Okay.
That's it.
The
That's all right.
orange.
We all the orange flavor. Uh-oh. Got the
Get your little
crisp. Right.
Right.
Got the
Freshly
crisp
cracked right
opening.
there.
Now I need a streaming bead just coming down the can. Right.
Okay. Say for those listening and not watching, could see him crack the can right there.
Right. Good deal. All right, brothers, we're gonna get into this thing, this moment. And
Yeah.
we thought we'd come with something interesting, a little different for us, but we're gonna work through this as it's got some history and some history that'll bring us all the way up to the present. So what we're talking about today is from Bruce Lee to T'Challa, martial arts, masculinity, and myths from Grasshopper to Grandmaster. So we're gonna have a little fun with this one today as well, but we've got some focus that we want to bring in throughout the conversation. So we hope you enjoy this episode of Raw and Refined, the Gentleman's Hour. And we're gonna start off. I think the fellas decided they're gonna let me have a little something this time and let me explore a little bit of my martial arts background. So for those that don't know, I trained and studied martial arts, specifically Shaolin Kung Fu, and a system called Emperor's Long Fist and a Five Family Fist. There's Rich. I can see him. He's back to Karate Kid days there, and
No.
been doing it for over 20 years. Been able to achieve a ranking of Sifu, which is a teacher, and 6th-degree Black Sash in the discipline as well, and I love it. And we'll talk a little bit more about all of that as well. But it all started somewhere. We got to talking, and I said, well, one of the things was back in the day, early 70s, going to go see kung fu movies. And typically, it was all fellas in the movie theater, right? I mean, there was rarely a mix of women and men up in the kung fu movie theater. We had a spot, and I don't know if any of y'all can remember, but there was a theater that would consistently show kung fu movies downtown in Chicago.
Yeah, the McVickers.
That's it. That's
Mhm.
it. That's it right there. And when that first got introduced, it was just phenomenal to see what they went through in the movies. And pretty much, and I guess you all could probably say something to this too, they all in essence about the same. They have a premise to it. There's a development. Somebody got wrong, they got to avenge, but they need to train because somebody is better than them. And then they finally develop a skill and mastery of it to where they can go and avenge, whatever happened to their family primarily as well. So, but it still drew you in. And then from there, we started to get black belt theater and kung fu theater on Saturdays, where they had a show or two that they would show, and we'd be around the TV looking at what that was as well. And of course, it has evolved throughout 50 years, man. That's about 50 years, really, of that. And just a little history, and then we can keep going. The first release into the United States of a kung fu movie was called The Five Fingers of Death.
Mm-hmm.
Some may know the original being King Boxer. And the interesting part about that is that they didn't think King Boxer as a title was going to get enough people wanting to see what it was about, because the Western thought process of boxing is not the same thought process
Mm-hmm.
of Eastern civilization and things. So that's why they changed the name to Five Fingers of Death. And he was the one who kind of introduced the death blow and things of that nature as well. So just a little background on things there. But it was Bruce Lee who actually popularized Kung Fu in the Western civilization. And I am thankful for him, because he was determined to really bring that culture here to the States. So just a little background history on all of that.
So I got a
Now,
question. I
go
got a
ahead.
question before you jump into all kinds of things. You said, and I saw on a Facebook post, I believe it was, where you were going to be talking about health and martial arts. And you just mentioned it earlier that you're a 6th degree Black Sash.
Mhm.
I have heard 6th degree black belt before. Is there a
Mhm.
difference, or is that the same thing? What's the deal?
It is equivalent to that, but there
Okay.
is a difference. And in the Chinese culture, they don't wear belts. Belts
Gotcha.
are of the Japanese or Korean culture.
Mhm.
In the
Gotcha.
Chinese culture, they wear actually silk or satin sashes instead of quote belts. So that's why you
Gotcha.
did. And you caught that. I appreciate that. Y'all
Yeah.
brothers, listen. I like that. That's good. That's good.
I'm a stickler for words, so
That's right.
every word has meaning. That's why word exists for a reason.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
right. That's
So
it.
cool. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, man, Bruce Lee though, man. Like I don't even know if there was a bigger star for us as a certain age than Bruce Lee.
Mhm,
Talked about the
mhm.
movie theaters downtown. There was a point where at least 2 or 3 of them were showing what we called karate flicks. Everything was
Right.
everything was a
Right.
karate flick, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Everything was
Yeah.
karate. Right.
It was called karate. We didn't know anything about the differences, but it was karate. And then you think
Mhm.
about like people wore the karate shoes and
Mhm.
like the famous
Yep. And that's
Last
what we called
Dragon.
them. Karate shoes, karate pants.
Mhm. And they still say, "You train karate?" I'm like, "No, I trained in kung fu. It's not karate. It's not anything other sports." So yes, but that
Well,
was it.
we would go downtown and watch
Mhm.
movies all like we take the train. We were little dudes, right? And
Mhm.
we would take the train and like watch 2, 3 karate
Yep.
flicks in a row.
Yep.
In a row.
Yep.
Crazy, right?
That's it. That is true. And surprisingly, since we've been talking a little bit about Bruce, he died before Enter the Dragon actually premiered.
Mhm.
A lot of folks didn't realize that, but he had already passed away. So that movie had already been done, and he was working on Game of Death when he died. So that's why if you look at Game of Death, you see these clips of somebody who isn't Bruce Lee. But
Mhm.
fortunately, they filmed the staircase, the step up scenes, going with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and all of them before. Unfortunately, he passed away. But yep,
Which is something, right? Kareem
right,
Yeah.
Kareem,
in a
right,
martial arts flick,
right.
all
So he
7 feet
was
tall of
right.
him.
He was one of Bruce's students.
Could you imagine if that dude actually kicked you full power? I love the way they visualized it in the movie.
Right. With the
Because you
print.
would you would expect it to leave some kind of print or
Right,
something.
right. That's true. That is true.
But the way that Bruce Lee really encompassed his culture. It was, I think, really fascinating. Some of his movies, he would even delve into some of the anti-Chinese stuff that was fairly common amongst the Japanese. And I remember one movie, it might have been Enter the Dragon, or was it Chinese Connection? One of them, where
Chinese Connection is where I think
there
you're
was a
thinking
sign
of.
that said no dogs and no Chinese. And I think, as Black Americans, I think we related to that a little bit. And I think that's partly why Bruce Lee was such a big figure for Black guys our age.
No, I agree with you, Greg. I think that if you go way back history, the Asian culture was not accepted in the United States as African Americans at that time, black folks, slaves, and everything. They were denied citizenship at all. They just wanted them over here to build the railroads and build the tracks and stuff like that, but did not want to give them any citizenship and basically treated them as lower, no class citizens or no class people too. So when we saw the movies, at least in my perception of it, was you could kind of identify with them because they were typically struggling. There's the folks who was putting their thumb on those who didn't have. And then to see them rise up from that and either defend or avenge whatever had happened, that was something that you were like, wow, I think you were saying, hey, I want to be able to do that. And I think that's where, there's been why I would say black folks gravitated towards the kung fu and the martial arts films was it kept having that type of symbolism associated with it.
Yeah, everyday people having wins, everyday people fighting back. A lot of movies, pretty much everybody that was in the movie could fight, right? On some level, almost
Right.
everybody. And
Right.
so it was just part of the norm that you were fighting as part of living, I guess, which is another thing that we can definitely identify with. Having the opportunity to do a roundhouse kick at somebody, some oppressor towards the end of the film, and and have an applause
we were channeling
track.
Bruce Lee.
Right.
That's it. When he jumps or he runs out of the school towards a crowd of police officers or military or whatever with their guns already pointing, he comes through there with the flying kick, and all you hear are the shots going off at the end of that. I mean, that's like this dude, right? He took them all on for the honor of his country and his people, and was just like, "Hey, I'm still gonna go for it."
Yeah. And of course, Bruce Lee physically, right, wasn't the biggest guy in the world, right?
Exactly.
But he'd take on a
Shoot,
room
but
of
that
100
dude was
people and
lean
take
as
them
I don't
all
know
out.
what. Yeah.
That'd be 100 guys. He'd taking them all out.
Yep. That's it, man. So the little folks, right? If kids and everything, you come out of there, you feel like oh, I could do something. I'm like, what? You start squaring up whoever you with and everything, and be like, come on. It's because you thought you knew something just from seeing a film.
Right.
Isn't that something?
But John, since obviously it's a practice and an art, like the way requiring all kinds of just skill and practice, guess my question for you is talk about it sort of from that perspective as a discipline and its benefit to you personally.
Oh man, yeah. So I think for me, when I was able to start practicing and training in Kung Fu, I was already an adult. I was taking my daughter to gymnastics. And the thing about it was right across the street was this school, the Kung Fu school. So, I take my daughter to Alex to practice. But what were we doing? Just sitting there. We ain't doing nothing. Just sitting there watching them tumble and do whatever and be there for about an hour or so doing nothing. So I said one day, I'm like, look, let me just go over here and just see what's going on. And they had a school set up. They had folks training on the floor level, and they had a couple of bags up where folks were punching and kicking, and they had some weapons displayed out as well. They welcomed me in. They said, what can we do for you?" And I said, "Hey, I was just kind of interested. I always had this interest in kung fu, and I saw you were over here and just wanted to come by and see." He said, "Well, you want to join us?" You want to join us? Just starting class. I was like, oh, really? I was like, yeah, come on. So I joined and was hooked ever since. Hooked ever since. So what I've received from it was so much, man. It was not just the physical aspect of the training and all of the time and discipline that it really takes in order to be able to master it. And then do you ever fully master it? I think that's left up to interpretation as well. But it taught me peace. And it's interesting that a martial art is helping to teach peace.
Mm.
It taught me how to work through stress, how to work through being calm, how to breathe whenever things could be stressful. Because if you let stress overcome you, that's where the real damage can happen, either damage to you physically or damage to you mentally. So going through the training, it actually helped me understand there's a way to manage through this stress and still come out on the other side successful or as a winner as well. The camaraderie that I had with my classmates and then the students that I had that came after me, my Sifu, who was a grandmaster, had so much knowledge in him. It always amazed me how he could remember all of the things that we were learning. But after time, repetition, making mistakes, understanding what happens in those mistakes, you started to learn, muscle memory started developing and things as well. So it just became something, and confidence as well. So we always teach that learning the art is not for you to go out and start beating up on people and things of that nature. Okay. And don't think that you're going to stop a gun just because you know a little something as well. Do we learn techniques to try to help disarm somebody? Yeah. I mean, we can. If they're up close enough and stuff, we can do. But as we've seen in some movies like Neo from the Matrix, it ain't going to be slow moving and dodging the bullet. What I'm saying? Right. right. You're like, nah, that's not quite happening type deal. But it does help build confidence. I mean,
So you
start to
you can't just reach out and snatch the whole front half off of a gun for somebody.
right,
You know,
right.
you don't have that particular technique down yet.
That particular technique is something I've learned, but I have not fortunately been faced in that situation enough to have to be an expert at it. Let me put it
There
like
you
that.
go. Thank God, right?
right. Exactly.
He said that's why I moved to where I moved to, man. I'm not trying to have guns in my face every day.
Exactly.
I'm not trying to live the life where I need to master that particular technique.
And that's true right there. So that was at a time when, I mean, what? Hand to hand was more probably of what you saw versus a weapon pulled out as well. So to learn, especially as we were growing up, I mean, that would have definitely put an edge towards you unless somebody was just a great boxer that could maybe was faster than you and had a little bit more skill versus what you were learning. But in essence, if you learned, practice, studied, you probably had the greater advantage if ever in a situation as well at that time. But yeah, man, that's what that is, man. And I think that I still carry it to this day is that aspect of it. It's the discipline and the stress management and things. So
yeah, that was interesting what you were saying when you were talking about muscle memory, because I know my own experience was very different and not martial arts like you were learning. And I always say I got my hand-to-hand training. I don't say I got my martial arts training because I got my hand-to-hand training. My brother and I are from a Marine Corps drill sergeant when we were shorties. And so he would have us doing some things that were obviously derived from martial arts, but it didn't involve the discipline and all of the other things that you had going on. We were just being taught how to fight and from the perspective of a Marine Corps drill sergeant. So, but interestingly, when you mentioned muscle memory, there are still things today that I practice as a result of that, and I do to help me to keep my hands good and and things of that nature.
Well, and certain aspects of martial arts, especially Tai Chi from the Chinese side or yoga from other Eastern Asian, Southern Asian styles, are great for flexibility, great for balance, great for memory and things of that nature because it teaches you about flexibility and breathing and how to control that aspect as well. So there's some great functionality to learn in martial arts. It's not all about just being able to defend yourself or something of that nature. But yes, it's an aspect of it, but there's a lot of health benefits and just mental health benefits from it as well. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So now, of those, I guess, lessons that I guess you learned through your practice or your practice, are there, you kind of alluded to some of them, but what are some of the ones that have stuck with you the most?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I was at a class earlier where you're right, Rich. I was helping to educate our men's health group about the importance of movement. And I think as I was having that conversation, I think that what they were getting from it was that the movement and the breathing is something that we tend to forget about when we're younger. We tend to think all power, strength, weightlifting, sweating. I got to get this powered out. But in doing so, you're actually weakening those joints because you're not helping to strengthen the tendons and ligaments that need to support all of that.
Mm.
So we kind of transition from younger being the weightlifter power dude to like, hey, we got to slow this down some, stretch these muscles, tendons, ligaments out so that we can move and so that I can still reach up and get that glass or get that sweater that I want to wear and hopefully not fall down in the process and break a bone or a hip or something. So I think as I've grown, being able to practice and understand that I do more of that than I probably do the hard force that I started off with. But it's a balance. It's one of those things I learned from my Sifu was that you don't have to. He always he said that basically a fight should not take more than about 5 minutes. So of course, going back when we watch a movie, fight scene might last about 10 minutes or 15 or whatever going on, and you like, God, dog. He said, look, you ain't got time for all of that. I mean, you need to go ahead and take care of what needs to be taken care of and move on. So it's interesting what he said because it was like, wow, okay. That's
Well,
so
you
they
know
make it,
that
of
don't
course.
sell movies.
Exactly. They got to make it flourish it and make it look like it's all of that as well. But I'll be honest,
And
when I actually was training, and I had to test for my first degree, Black Sash, that was at least a 6 hour test. And an hour of that was standing still in what we call our horse stands. An hour of that was free movement, but you had to consistently stay moving for an hour. And then an hour was sparring. You had to spar for a solid hour. So that means you didn't get to take a break and just sit down and be like, oh, no. The next team, group, person, whatever was coming at you, and you had to be ready to defend yourself for that. And then the rest of it was the forms and the drills and the weapons and all the other stuff as well. But it was at least 6 hours, man. It was like that's the hardest thing I'd ever done was to get
I'd
that. But
imagine.
I was proud. I did it. That was the thing about it as well. So
that's dope.
it's yeah, but it's funny to see some of the movies and how they do their things and the choreography, man. Some of that is just phenomenal as well. And there's different disciplines that probably teach that a little bit better than others as well. But if we get into that, we'll get into that as well. But yeah.
Well, but some of that is movie kung fu, the choreography, some of the
Right.
sweetest stuff. And then as we move out of the Grasshopper era and move forward in time, the special effects game takes over reality.
But again, before then, they had their special effects because remember we would see them flying through the air and
Oh yeah, now
and
even in the
flipping and
Grasshopper
throwing
era,
stuff,
they
right,
was
and
using
everything.
lines and wires
Right.
and stuff as opposed to computer generated
Right.
stuff later. But
Right.
yeah, it was always some special effects involved. But
Remember
yeah,
some
you
fights,
know.
they were in the air,
Right.
I was
suspended
gonna
in
say
air
Moses
fighting.
was flying
Spin
through the
trees.
air.
Right, exactly. Jumping from a limb that's as thin as my finger and doing, man. But it was spectacular. You're like, wow, get out of here,
Yeah.
get out of here. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Of course, going back to those old movies, Bruce Lee, of course, being the Mr. Everything, but it was also cool, and it was particularly cool for me to have a brother named Jim Kelly.
Yes, brother.
Sort of taking on the mantle. And just, I remember
Yes.
saying like, that's my cousin, but just To have a black
Right.
man like in that space was really quite a thrill for a lot of us, I know.
Yeah, I agree, man. When Jim Kelly hit the scene, it was like, what? And which
Mm-hmm.
again gave you that, like, wait a minute, I can do this thing for this us
Mm-hmm.
young black kids, black
And he
boys.
was cool too. So
He was cool,
He
right?
was cool. And the girls liked him.
Right, right,
mm-hmm.
right.
And he
So,
unapologetically was whooping mugs,
right.
which is that. I think that piece that we all resonates for all of us because of the society that we live in. Everybody wants to be able to do that at some point to
Yeah.
the man.
Yep.
The man.
Right.
Yep, to the man. That's right.
I
That's
remember
right.
this movie, it wasn't really a martial arts movie, but one of my favorite ones was with Jim Kelly doing crazy. It was Three the Hard Way.
Three the Hard Way.
Mm-hmm.
That was a
Fred
great
Williamson.
classic.
Yep.
Fred
Mhm.
Hammer.
Yep.
And that was just like,
that was a super class, but that demonstrated the crossover effect that the martial arts films was having. So
Yep.
Jim Kelly was a straight up star at that point. So
Yep.
he could jump over to something else, to action, other kind of action besides just martial arts action. But yeah, that was a good call there. That was a good one.
well, and that's funny, that theme, as you said, is like going after the man, right?
Yep.
Or like,
that was in so many of them, but that's what's interesting for me. My all-time favorite didn't really quite follow that. On some levels it did. There's always the man that's evil on some levels but it was Five Deadly Venoms of that. Yeah. And so for me, the focus on the different styles
Tiger
Right.
style.
yeah.
Right.
But my favorite dude was the Toad though.
Yeah.
Weak spot? I don't have a weak spot. Well,
Right.
yeah, you do. Turns
Right.
out you do. You ain't even
Yeah.
know about it. But yeah,
Right.
that one was my overall favorite. I thought interesting as I was looking at the notes. We talked about Bruce Lee philosophy, Jim Kelly, presence and representation, and then Five Deadly Venoms was about strategy. Ultimately, it came out to be the one cat that was successful was the one who mastered all the styles.
Right. Right. Had to keep one. They had to keep one in order to, just in case, just in case something happened with the others. He needed one that knew enough of the other styles to be able to help in that instance and things. So yeah, that was
he was the ultimate check and balance.
right. Right.
You think about it like that, because any one of these others could go off the rails.
Go rogue. Yep.
And so to your point, this one here, he's adaptable enough to address it, no matter which one, if one goes astray.
Right.
Yeah, but that was my favorite flick. But it was one of those Saturday morning joints when they took over TV, the classics. And I remember the first time I saw that one, I was like, oh my God.
Right.
It changed my perspective. And
Climbing
then I
up
didn't
walls.
see it for like decades.
Climbing a wall.
Yeah. Then I couldn't see it for like decades. And then finally they resurfaced a lot of those classics.
Mine, from a training standpoint, that I felt was pretty realistic was the 36 chamber with Gordon Liu. Man, so when you're training and then you see that movie, you're like, wow, okay. And you are, in some instances, depending on the school you're in, and that you may do something at least similar to that training that you see in there as well. So that's what just kind of validated what you were going through and everything as well.
Yeah.
But that was, for me, when you look at the actual training aspect of it, the 36 chamber would have been the one for that one.
Yeah, that was the dope flick.
So yeah.
Some of those, they gave you a little of that. They gave you that insight into what life might have been like 100 years ago.
Right.
In Asia.
Right.
Well, one of the other really sort of crossover type movies was The Last Dragon. Again, another example of sort of a merger between Black urban culture and martial arts, right?
Yes.
That movie was like everything back then, Last Dragon. And I guess he had taken on a whole persona, but it's just a fascinating movie. I think I saw it not too long ago in the last year or so, and it was just fascinating to watch, to like look back at it.
I'm gonna have to do. I'm
time
gonna have to
back.
do that again. I haven't seen it in decades. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah.
But
Don't
it
forget
kind of
Show Enough.
represented the
Show Enough.
Hollywoodification of martial arts to me. It had kind of a pop culture kind of feeling to it.
You had Vanity in there.
Yeah.
Which is like, what?
Well, that made me go see it more than once back in the day. just for that reason alone.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Leroy Green.
Can we come up with a more stereotypical name?
Right. Oh my goodness. Hilarious.
Classic
man.
Hollywood, right?
Right.
See, we're gonna call him Leroy Green.
Leroy Green, the last dragon.
That's a strong strong.
Show enough.
Yep.
Show enough.
It's the interesting thing. And then, of course, you move years later, and then its impact on music, and like,
well, the 36 Chambers.
And then Wu-Tang Clan just took it to a whole nother level. Congratulations on their induction, right? World Music, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Congratulations.
But
It's
they
about
have
time.
one of the most well-known images in like music and pop culture. It's like they are like massive, all by taking again sort of that the imagery and stuff that we all sort of grew up at as little kids and made it global. It's really a fascinating story.
Yeah, the way they wove it into everything, the full immersion technique, basically. But again, they immersed us and themselves in that culture, but they did it completely from the hood.
Yes.
But why it worked was because of the parallel, like you said. And so many of these movies, especially the ones we grew up on, they were all set in the hood.
Right.
The hood just looked a little different.
Right.
It was a Chinese hood or Japanese hood versus an American ghetto, right? And so there was all of those same things. And they were depicting typically, like I said, a time period where maybe only the wealthy had electricity.
Right.
In most of those films.
Right.
So it was a very, and they're just like was common in a lot of movies of that time. They were very much set driven, right? It wasn't, we've got in America, we would have had a Western, which the backdrop was some kind of little desert town propped up out of nowhere. It was pretty much the same kind of little towns, but they just had Asian decor out in the middle of nowhere.
Exactly.
But it worked.
That's true.
It worked because it was
worked
relatable.
like a charm.
Again, because it was all the other things that were going on, the same kind of struggles, the same kind of challenges, all of those things that made it completely relatable. And there was fight, which always kind of works in our favor in terms of, let's be honest, young male enjoyment, right?
Yep.
Hormones going crazy.
Right.
I still like a good action film today.
Yep. Exact. Agree. And then the weapons. I mean, how many of y'all gonna pull out a sword or a spear or something and start trying to do somebody or an axe? Well, and then even so, we were talking about Wu-Tang right then, but y'all remember everybody was kung fu fighting.
Gosh, yeah.
But that was the music, right? And they had the music that
early
went
hip
along
hop
with
song.
it. Right. Like wow. And still, folks. I mean, for us, you can say that, and everybody knows what you're talking about as well. You know what I'm saying? It's like wow.
Yeah.
And things. But there was culture. I mean, there was culture through the movies as well, and their music, their art, whatever that was for them, was brought to us for just to learn a whole new culture and things that has occurred.
Fascinating, right?
And created another culture along the way. When you think about the global reach of the Wu and the impact that they've had across generations again, because, sometimes we forget until we encounter 20-something-year-olds that we're not 20-something-year-olds, right? When the 20-something-year-old gets excited from seeing me in my Wu-Tang hoodie,
Right.
Right.
And they're looking at the Wu from a totally different perspective than we were. I was there when the 36 chambers dropped, and I was losing my mind back in, that's what, 89, 90, somewhere right around there.
Well, 92, 93.
92, 90, yeah, right, early 90s. But so this guy was like, that's a really dope hoodie.
Well, you know what's funny
the,
about them? That they could have been accused of appropriating culture, but I don't think anybody ever, I don't know that they've ever actually been accused of that, which is a whole other
and that's
thing.
because I think they did a really good job, number one, of celebrating someone else's culture as opposed to trying to. Appropriation is when you take it without permission, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think they celebrated it and shared it more so than tried to like pass it off like it was something they came
like it was
up with.
their own.
And then in true hip hop fashion, they sampled it and created their own uniqueness within that. And that's the beauty of hip hop, that sample piece that allowed that. And they had to come up with a new set of rules for sampling because historically, right, copyright, trademark, you're allowed to take something that's already existing and turn it into something else, right? You can take something that's copyrighted and transform it. That there are exceptions for that historically in the law, but they had to come up with something different for sampling because they realized this was so dope it could make so much money. But, but what the RZA was doing, there was clear elements from a lot of these different movies and sounds and soundtracks, but the incredible artistry that he was using to weave them into something else. You can't get mad and say that he did something wrong with this, because if I took this small element from this movie over here and three other elements from these others and then I put them together into this song, that one little element by itself doesn't even sound like the song that it was originally part of. So why are you tripping? Just the level of skill of some of the crazy stuff that he was doing. But it's still so rooted in the fundamentals of some of those old Chinese sounds. Because, I mean, he just go straight strings on something. And you're like, wow. It was really complex and then really simple in other places. And so I would say more than anything, he was an homage to that style than appropriation. I think we see examples of cultural appropriation every day. Greg, you and I have had these conversations for years. You've always telling me, I'll quit tripping. And I'm like, no, that's another example. That's another example. You need to calm down. But there are clear examples. I honestly don't think this is one, though.
And to give RZA his credit, I mean, I didn't know this till recently that he actually wrote the score for Kill Bill 1 and 2. So
got a new movie coming out too.
He's got a second one coming out. I think. Don't forget, he did The Man with the Iron Fist. As well. So I think there's a second part finally coming out or something. Is from what I heard. But
Okay.
And then we went.
No. You take that back. He did 2. The new one is called One Spoon of Chocolate. So another martial arts thriller.
Okay.
That he's coming out with.
Cool. One Spoon of Chocolate. Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out.
I think I saw the trailer for it the other day. Looks very good. He's upped his game. And,
I saw that, yeah.
And Quentin Tarantino is actually, I guess, producing it. Of all people. Who also, by the way, incorporated martial arts and Kill Bill and some of these other movies that he did. Again, expanding the range of exposure to people of Asian culture, martial arts, and so forth.
And in some cases, we'll say Asian influenced culture, because in some of these instances, because I would say Kill Bill is very much American. When you think about it, when you start to look at the underlying story, the way the characters are portrayed, they happen to be doing martial arts. But it's a very American context to the just level of ignorant violence and etc.
Far more violent.
Yeah, I think that's part of the shift that I think we've seen over time. That's Hollywood in general. The levels of violence, the levels of just craziness, because it sells. But it's still got to be good, right? In
Right.
some respects, because like you mentioned, Kill Bill, like other Tarantino flicks, they are quirky, they're weird, but they're still well-made movies.
Mhm.
And I think that has always been a hallmark of the martial arts films that stuck with us. Even if they were different in their production style from a traditional American film or whatever, there were still levels of quality of production in those films, the ones that stuck with us. We still need good characters. We still need good stories, even if it's the
Right.
same story being
Right.
recycled.
Right.
And that we kind of have an idea of what's going to happen. It's still got to be more than just some fighting.
Right.
Yup.
The fighting has to be elite, or the training aspects of it, or some parts of that story still have to be really good to have pulled us in
Hold the
and
movie
keep us
together.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly.
and make us want to talk about it. Because we're talking about movies that we saw 40 years ago.
Right.
Right. And comparing them to some that we saw 10, 15 years ago. But what have you seen in recent years has fallen to the category of was a good martial arts film?
Jeez.
I
I mean,
can't
like
think of one.
Blade is now, what, 20 years ago
At
or
least.
something like
Yeah.
that?
And The Matrix was still also in that vein
Right.
as well. Yeah,
And
those are
there's a-
old movies now.
T'Challa is that, and one of the things I was going to mention earlier was that part of the shift has been, in many respects, away from the martial arts film to the action film that involves martial arts.
Right. Right.
There's a lot
Right.
more, just like we said in the old martial arts films, almost everybody could fight, right? Everybody knew
Right.
some style of hand-to-hand combat. And in today's
Right.
action films, almost everybody can fight too, but most of them aren't true martial artists, but they might
Right.
have some, there might be some mixed martial arts type of
Right.
thing going on.
That's good. Right.
You
Right.
rarely see somebody that don't see the
doing
traditional
leopard style
Shaolin
or
monk.
praying
Right.
mantis or
Right.
something like that. This is going to be
Oh,
a
we
mix.
can't
Yeah.
do this without mentioning Jackie Chan, and
Yeah,
John
Chan.
getting
Yeah.
your take on Jackie Chan.
Oh,
Give
man.
us your spiel on Jackie Chan. How do you feel about him? Because I
Jackie
think Jackie's one of
Chan's-
the dopest of all time.
Yes, I totally agree. He has done so much, and who's to say what that would have looked like if Bruce was still living during the time? But he actually was the stunt for a couple of Bruce Lee's movies. He actually got hurt by Bruce Lee. Enter the Dragon. He was Bruce, being who Bruce is, such a caring person as well, got to saying, "Hey, I really am sorry that I hurt you in this scene or whatever," and started to get to know him and brought him back for one of his other films to be a stunt player in there. But Jackie's training was a lot different from Bruce's as well, and Jackie brought more of a comedic side
Yeah.
to martial arts with the artistry, we'll say, of it. It wasn't just the fast
Yeah.
kick or the fast hands. He was
And the
flipping over
gymnastics
bars and
of it,
jumping
too.
and doing, but he was really doing that stuff. You
Right.
see what
He's
I'm
just
saying?
Jackie was
With no
super,
stunt
super,
doubles.
super cold.
Yeah, it was right. No, wasn't no stunt double.
No, he was the stunt double.
Jackie was it, and just phenomenal. And still to this day, he's able to perform. And just to name a couple of just quick others, I mean, you got Jet Li.
Jet
Jackie
Li.
also was the one who before Bruce did Kato with the Green Hornet. Jackie was able to now incorporate an Asian martial art into Western movies. So Rush Hour and some of those films that he did, Police Story, not quite, but Rush Hour is definitely.
Yep.
And then Jet Li came along, did some with hip hop. Aaliyah, was it Aaliyah that he did a movie with as well?
It was Aaliyah. Yeah.
And
Jet Li was
and Jet Li
fast.
he's a true martial artist as well, champion
Yeah.
in his own right as well. And then the newer cat that some of you may or may not know is Donnie Yen. So if you're a John Wick fan, Donnie Yen was the blind dude in the most recent John Wick film. And I think they're getting ready to try to make a spinoff with him.
Oh.
Donnie Yen's more of that mixed martial artist person. But there's a few, man. I don't know if you guys, if you had a chance, check out a movie called The Raid. Man, you want some straight up martial arts action?
Okay.
Golly.
The Raid.
The Raid, man. And then the sequel to
peep that.
was just as dope as well. So I mean, this was one of those that's purely more action. Yes, there's a story to it, but
Yeah.
the action is what brings you to that movie. It was just phenomenal. But yeah. So I get passionate with y'all. I don't know if y'all know this, but I own about 500 martial arts films, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Didn't know that.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Didn't
Yep.
know that.
Collected them from the VHS stages to when they were DVDs, and now
Mhm.
everything's kind of streaming and stuff. But yep.
Had no idea.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
one movie we should not forget to mention is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yes.
It was such, I think it won the Oscar that year. Just
Yes.
was a phenomenal film, as I recall. I haven't seen it in a
Yeah.
long time. Might need to go back and peep it. But
Mhm.
it was one of those told a story, but
Right.
then had the elements of martial arts in them too, right?
Well, in old school martial arts, right?
Right.
So in a modern age, here they brought an older kind of theme up to the present, and it was like, wow. And like you said, it was recognized for what it was able to do
Mm-hmm.
as well. Hero, that was with Jet Li, was also
Mhm.
fascinating film as well.
And I mentioned it just in passing earlier, but in terms of cultural impact, you really can't not mention Karate Kid.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
In all
Oh
seriousness.
yeah.
Right.
Just
What was
from
that, like 4? Was it like part 4 or something? 3 or
Oh,
4?
Right.
But yeah, that is a
Wow.
big movie.
And from is interesting to me was from a totally non-martial arts perspective, but one that I often talk about in an education perspective. We talk all the time about using them, Mr. Miyagi and a student using his techniques of I'm gonna have you over here doing this, and you're not even gonna actually realize that you're learning.
That you're training, right? Wipe
Mhm.
on, wipe off. That's it.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, we don't.
That is
Wow,
true. That is
fascinating.
true. There's some good stuff, man. And martial arts is now, like you said, in most action films, you might have the guns and you might have some weapons, but in essence, they're doing some hand-to-hand combat that has some basis to some Asian influence. We'll put it like that as well. Yes, there's some other styles from other countries, capoeira and everything as well. But you still have a pretty great influence of that Asian culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really, kung fu and karate, I think, or as we kind of generically lumped everything into karate when we were younger,
Right.
but kung fu, as a result of Bruce Lee's influence, I think is the greatest influence when you start to think about, oh yeah, you got Japanese, and so you might have your shoguns or this or that, and some of
And
those other
ninjas,
things,
right.
and your ninjas, but just the kung fu seems to be that strongest influence out of all of that.
Definitely. Definitely. You had Ong Bak. I don't remember if y'all remember that, which brought in the Thai influence of martial arts. He did his thing in that, which was a phenomenal movie as well. And Taekwondo has had some of its influence hit in and
Yeah.
out throughout the years too. But commercially, Taekwondo is probably outperforming karate and kung fu as it relates to commercial training. So, when you're taking kids, where they going? They're going to Taekwondo type.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
For their classes. But it's interesting because of what we just said. A lot of influence that we've seen has really been more of the kung fu aspect, but yet why this? And now I'm gonna give my theory on that is that kung fu, it is a discipline that the old teachers, the Sifus, grandmasters, they teach sparingly, if I can say that. And this is where Bruce Lee got into some trouble when he first came over because he
was
wanted
trying
to
get.
teach to others that weren't Asian. And those at that time was like, no, this is us. This is ours. You
It's
need
our
to
stuff.
keep this here and our stuff. But Bruce was like, no, why do we need to hold on to this? This is something that the world needs to know about and do. So that's how Bruce started getting that going. But yet and still, there's still that culture of, well, those that can train, but it's not going to be, we're going to do this on every block and everybody get a black belt either. So that's been some of the knock. Not to say that there's no greatness to Taekwondo and things as well, but that's been some of the questioning about that. But it helps. It all shows discipline, I think, and it all shows how to manage stress and how to be able to defend if needed as well. I think all that still is there.
Awesome. Awesome.
And there's some new ones still coming out, like we said, that one with RZA and Netflix and other avenues. They still got
Oh
some
yeah.
martial arts flicks that are still coming out. And now with the technology, it's like wow. It's funny, you guys. You ever go back and you looking at something old like a Godzilla flick or something like that, and you can see all the stuff now.
Yeah, you can notice you can notice the wires. You can notice when they switch to a model or
Right,
something like that, the things that we didn't know at the time, but that's because we were immersed in it and it was the state of the art at that
right.
moment. And so that
Mhm.
continues to shift for us. And so it continues to shift.
Which is good, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
who
it
was it?
needs
Kung
to
Kung
keep
Fu? Y'all
changing.
remember Hong Kong Fu?
Oh,
When we
Hong
were talking
Mm-hmm.
Kong
about the
Phooey.
shows on our last episode,
Yeah,
we talking about
Hong
Hong Kong
Kong
Phooey.
Phooey.
Wow.
That's funny. Hong Kong Phooey. Hadn't thought of that name in a
Right.
long.
Well, you know, one thing this conversation just bringing up for me again is the way in which martial arts and those movies and all of that sort of reinforce brotherhood, like the way we're able to talk about it and share it in a way that feels like a shared experience that I think is like bonding is a big part of what made those movies, right? And makes that
Right.
our understanding of it so powerful, right?
Mhm.
Yep. It
It's
helps
like
you
you
to
leave,
believe. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You know, who didn't leave out of the movie like pretending to do
Right.
karate with each other?
Right. Exactly. It made you feel like and believe that you really could do some things and what you say, overcome the man. Well, with it.
Yeah, and
And that's something we
innate in so
share.
much of
Yeah.
that, I think, is because of that the notion of training, the notions of self improvement that are built into it. So much of it is rooted in Eastern philosophy, right? Or at
Yeah.
least it's coded in that, as Hollywood has changed things always. But this idea of improving oneself through reflection, through training, through discipline, through all of these things, and on the other side of it, you come out a better version of you who just happens to be able to whoop all kinds of mugs with
Right.
several different techniques because you just happen to have this technique, tiger style. Okay, well,
Right.
I'll
You
let you try
found the
my
counter
Wu-Tang. I'll let
to
you
that
try my
style. Right.
Wu-Tang style.
Right. Right.
And so this idea that of being able to go away somewhere, put some time in and put in some work and come out as a polished new version of oneself. You usually get some new gear too, you know, a new crisp white outfit. You get your ponytail all hooked up depending on where you're at. The
Right. Right.
Japanese cats would rock the long joint down the back, right?
Yep. Yep.
But
Yep.
you got all of those kind of pieces of it, right? That connect in there is just, I'm making myself better. I'm moving forward with this new improved version. And you better show me the proper respect. I'm going to kick you through this wall over here and it's going to jack up
Literally.
somebody's noodle shop.
Right.
But hey,
But
they
as you said,
understand.
it was through training and discipline that you were able to get to that level as well. I think that speaks to life in general. Things don't necessarily come easy, especially for folks look like us and things. So we got to put in the time, we got to put in the effort. And I'll say in most cases, if you do so, you're going to achieve with that as well. And I think, I don't know, to me, I think it means a little bit more. I think from the training and the hard work and the energy. Oh yeah, I think at the time, don't nobody really want to have to go through it. But in the end, it's something that you feel a little, like you said, Rich, you feel a little more special about. You're like, hey, I earned this. I did this. I'm comfortable and confident in this as well. And that's what I
Mhm.
think this has helped to develop throughout the years as well.
Yeah, and that translates to every part of our life, right? If we put in the energy and effort and the training and the discipline and make those improvements, I know we've done that in our professional careers over time, right? You put in the energy and the effort and the training and the discipline to improve so that you can achieve those levels of
Lofty.
success in your professional space. So it's the same kind of thing. You don't get to physically whoop people. That happens to be your actual profession. John shouldn't be whooping anybody professionally. He's supposed to
Right.
be healing people.
Right. So that was the running joke, though, Rich. Was that here you got the skill to beat somebody up and break them down and break some bones or whatever, but then you got to go take care of them afterwards. Also, right?
Wow, that is
You got to
true.
work
You're
on
a
the healing,
doctor,
right?
so you have a unique understanding
you
of,
took an oath. You
of
took an
human
oath.
anatomy. No,
Do no harm.
and
Right.
you've been trained. You're a 6-degree Black Sash.
Yeah.
You couple 6 degrees Black Sash with a unique understanding of human anatomy. You could, you know,
Yes.
I ain't even scared of you though.
That's right. That's
So-
right. That's right. That's right.
Because
And you ain't
I'm big.
supposed to be. Right.
Because I'm big. I'm bigger and quicker. So
There you go. There you go. There you go. That's it. That is it.
one lesson that stayed with you, one myth you had to unlearn, and one way these experiences shaped your relationships with other men.
Well, I think I would say what I was thinking about saying was really the fascinating way in which cultures really clash as it relates to martial arts and the films that we grew up watching. And just really a culture that we weren't steeped in, but somehow took off in a big way amongst Black kids in the United States. I think it's worthy of some deeper study and analysis, like what was really going on there, because we really sort of adopted it and adapted it to our reality growing up. And you still kind of feel some of that today, the stories that were told, but also the sense of like empowerment and the bonding stuff that I think that you developed with other guys like you when you watch those movies. Just a fascinating thing. I don't know if there's anything comparable to it today, but I know that it was all instrumental in our upbringing, certainly mine.
Well, I think so. That's a good question. That may be something for another day for us. But when you just said that, GK, I'm like, well, maybe it's the superhero movies that they're watching now. But I can't. For me right now, I can't put it all together yet to why that could be it. But maybe that's what this generation has, where we had our superheroes were those kung fu. I mean, really, were those kung fu folks and what they were able to accomplish, I think.
When you start looking at root stories, I think you definitely can still see that, because in most cases you've got that good versus evil kind of deal that still makes its way through there. The thing I think that stood out to me is really interesting, the cultural connection as we look at how, as you mentioned, Greg, how Black America has embraced so many aspects of Asian culture as a result of these movies. It's kind of interesting when you think about it in the context of when we talk about culture, one of the ways that culture is always translated is through food, right? Right. One way to explore other cultures is to eat their food. And America in its racist legacy, right? That's why you find Chinese restaurants in the hood, right? Is because historically it didn't want Chinese, limited where the Chinese could live. We talked about that kind of stuff earlier.
Right.
We limited where they could live, and then there were very interesting rules in place a long time ago. And so one of the reasons you got so many Chinese restaurants is because that was one of the businesses that they were allowed to have. And it was one of the businesses, in order to there were some of the immigration rules that were in place, limited how Chinese people could come over here. And you could bring them over here.
In particular.
Right, the Exclusion Act. So they could come over if they were coming over to work in a business. And so, but you could bring like family members over to work in a business. And so one of those acceptable businesses were restaurants. But they were only allowed to do them in certain neighborhoods, and they couldn't get loans for them, but they were allowed to put them in the hood. And so there's always been a whole bunch of Chinese restaurants in the hood because that was just where they would let them put them at the time. And so that was for most of us, that's our initial introduction to Asian culture is through Asian food. And quite often it was hood shops. GK had an interesting experience with us growing up in Maywood, because I never thought of Maywood as the hood, but that was still a ghetto fabulous Asian restaurant type of deal.
Right.
It was.
They're from Thailand, but still.
Yeah, they were from Thailand, but it was Chinese food as far as I was concerned.
Absolutely.
Right.
Growing up, but Just looking at that for a moment, just thinking about this, we were first introduced to the culture through the food and some of those aspects. And so I'm, depending on the restaurant you're going to, you're hearing other languages being spoke. You don't know what they're saying, and somebody's voice or we can all read inflection, right, and tone. So you could tell when somebody in the back screwed up whether what they said or not, right? But that was our first introduction to the culture, and then I think as the movies took over. But just an interesting kind of side thought popped into my head about how America has kind of pushed us together in some respects, but in other respects, we see throughout American history that America teaches everybody to treat us poorly. America teaches every other immigrant, treat black people badly, and that's your way up and out. So it's always been a kind of an interesting relationship.
Well, and something that kind of puts an image to that is there's a series, I believe it's on HBO, called Warrior. Warrior is an outstanding series. So I think we probably know some of the history. Again, Bruce Lee wanted to try to bring Asian culture to America. They let him co-star, or not co-star, be the sidekick of the Green Hornet in Kato. But everybody wanted to be Kato because he was whooping behinds up in there with such a skill that nobody ever seen before. So Bruce came to Hollywood with this concept of a show, Kung Fu. I mean, back in the day, I don't know how much of us really looked at that to say, why is this white dude starring in Kung Fu?
That was my immediate question when I first saw it. And of course, we learned years later, and for most of us, as a result of a movie, learned the story.
Right, exactly. So that was of a movie, right? But that was Bruce, and they were like, "Nah, America ain't ready for a lead Chinese actor doing this thing." So
just wandering around America,
right,
by himself.
Right, exactly.
It was David Carradine, right?
Yep, it was. It was David
Carradine.
But Warrior, the series, is actually based on the concept of what Bruce Lee was trying to bring.
Okay.
And the actors, the action is amazing. But what it also lets us know about is history. And again, how Asians were depicted in our U.S. history, but also how the Irish were depicted in U.S. history. They didn't like them either.
Yeah, I mean, every immigrant group that came along had to go through their thing.
Right.
Before they got accepted.
English, right?
Right.
So if you want, that would be a great series to look at
look for that.
Okay.
As well.
So, well, we've kind of meandered around. John, you want to hit us with any final thought?
I think this was a outstanding conversation for us to have. Again, some fun, but some history and some insight on how martial arts really influenced us in ways that we probably didn't even recognize or realize. We fell in love with Bruce. We fell in love with T'Challa. And they both had some aspect of martial arts that they brought to us as well. They were defending the people that needed defending, did it in a way that helped to show us that it can be done. But we also understand that there's a growth process from that. And we made the analogy of from the grasshopper to the Grandmaster. And that's what all of us still go through in life, is that we've got to start somewhere, be able to go through the discipline, the training, the falls that may occur, but the rises that happen as well, in order to hopefully get to that point where we are the Grandmaster. And now with that, being able to teach that to somebody else that's coming behind you as well. Because what's the other adage? What good is it if you can't pass it on? You see what I'm saying? You holding on to stuff, all that is going to die with you. What good was that really? So to be able to take that and take what you've learned and be able to pass that on to others is something that I hope we recede from this as well. And another example would be RZA, how we talked about him and how he's learned and love of the martial arts and martial arts movies, that he himself had a hit album off of that as well. Now Hall of Famers, again, we say congratulations to the Wu and all that they've done, but then with there you go. And then with all that they've done and what RZA's still doing, even to this day, just shows the influence that that's had on our culture as well. So we just wanted to acknowledge that and just say, hey, we appreciate it. And I think to know how that has established a bond between us and probably some of our audience members out there as well. Well, this is something to reflect on and to share as well. So this is a part of the brotherhood that I think we've been able to show to you all today. And we hopefully you had a great time with us today at Raw and Refined, the Gentleman's Hour.
Peace.
Like, share, comment, subscribe. Catch
All
you
the
next
above.
time.
All the above.